Aborigines are called natives, or they're always dark-skinned people. You and I are aborigines, but you don't let them be called an aborigine.
In the books, Letters and Notes on the North American Indigenous People of North America, written in 1841 by author George Cartlin, a noted ethnographer, describes American Indigenous People of North America as all primitive tribes known in America are dark copper-colored with jet black hair, while most possess curls in the extreme, which today is considered nappy hair, and every level of wavy hair in between. The texture of the hair is generally fine, soft or silk, or coarse and harsh. Catlin also noted, the hair of the men falling down to the hams, and sometimes to the ground, is divided into plaits or slabs, 2 inches wide, and filled with a profusion of glue and earth, which becomes very hard and remains unchanged from year to year. Today, this form of hair is called locks.
All right, so Ronald Dalton Jr. was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to Black American parents who had experienced different parts of the civil rights movements in 1960s. Ronald's mother grew up in New York housing projects in Harlem and with mixed heritage by way of Virginia and the West Indies. While his mother experienced the Black Power movement in Harlem, New York, around such Black leaders as Malcolm X and Huey Newton, Ronald's father experienced racism while growing up in West Virginia during the Jim Crow era. The two would meet through church in the Greater Refuge Temple in Harlem, New York, on Clayton Powell Boulevard. Little did they know that their firstborn child would grow up to be a visionary and truth seeker. Growing up as a youth in the Black Pentecostal Christian household, Ronald would sit through enough church services to read the Bible from the beginning to the end, more than just a couple of times. He was always into reading books, especially books that contained new knowledge. As a young adult, he was always curious about things in the Bible that left unanswered questions. In 2011, while working at the Sinai Grace Hospital in Detroit, Michigan, Ronald started to see the world in a different way. He started to see the suffering of his fellow Black people on a grand scale and wanted answers. He asked God in prayer one night for wisdom and knowledge to explain the madness that he was seeing in the Black community. God heard his prayers and opened Ron's eyes to the truth. Ever since that day, God would reveal the truth to Ronald in bits and pieces about the true heritage of Black people in America as it pertains to the ancient Hebrew Israelites of the Bible. God would reveal to Ron the real reason why Blacks have been oppressed for so many years. Over the years, this knowledge was too much to bear alone, and it was too much information not to share with his people. Ron then embarked on writing a book about the knowledge he had obtained from God, and at that same time, he also began putting together an educational documentary DVD presentation full of pictures, charts, facts, and ancient quotes to back his message. He titled the DVD and books, Hebrews to Negroes, Wake Up Black America. After this, he put together a website, theneGroNetwork.com, to spread his message to everybody in America and the world. Today, Ron enjoys teaching and enlightening others on the real truth. Ron believes that real truth is priceless. It cannot be stopped from reaching the world. Ron's favorite motto, a lie cannot live forever, holds very true in his educational work, Hebrews to Negroes, as he exposes the lies and reveals the truth. For more information about the author, you can visit the NegroNetwork.com. And that's been linked in the Jumbotron. So that's the bio that I have for Ron. You guys, if you can give me a hand clap or some hearts and things like that, some interactivity in the space. Thank you so much. Welcome to my space, Ron. And thank you so much for joining us this evening. And so I just wanted to, get into these questions with you. What launched your initial quest to put together Hebrews to Negroes? What was the deciding factor for you?
Well, being the son of a pastor, um, over the years growing up, we would be in church all the time. But as I got older and I started working in the hospital as a PA, a physician assistant, then I started, like the Bible says, I started to see these things happening to Black people, in all types of forms. In the hospital, you see domestic violence, you see psychiatric issues, social issues. You'll see, physical ailments, short term, long term. All types of things. Murder, drug overdose. You know, it was just nonstop. Every year after year in the hospital, in the ER, it's a trauma level 1 hospital with tons of Black people. Detroit at the time had like 1 million Black people in there until they started leaving Detroit. But when one day I was sitting in the back of the church in the afternoon service, and I was already in my career, and I just opened up the Bible that was in the back of the pew, and it was on Deuteronomy 28, and I started reading it from the beginning to the end. And in Deuteronomy 28, it talks about the curses of Israel and the blessings of Israel. If the Israelites were to keep the commandments and laws and statutes of God, which are listed in the law of Moses, we all know about the 10 commandments, but there's more commandments than just 10. But the Bible says if we were to keep these commandments, then we would receive the blessings of Israel. And if we didn't keep the commandments, then we would have the curses of Israel that will continue for generation upon generation, until we wake up and come back to God and His commandments. And so when I read that in the last verse of Deuteronomy 28:68 says, "I will bring you into Egypt again with ships, and from there you'll be sold uh, as bondmen and bondwomen to other nations." And so that means slaves. And then the word ships is also in there. And the word Egypt in Hebrew means like a house of bondage. It means trouble and affliction and distress and dire straits and hard times. It means to be bound up and to be captured and tied up. Because Hebrew is basically, you have a root, and the root of the word kind of explains why the word means what it means. So it's more than just the word means this in the lexicon. It's also a meaning behind the word that is something that's seen when you look at ancient Hebrew, not modern Hebrew, ancient Hebrew. And so I just looked at that and said, no, well, nobody on planet Earth has been scattered to the four corners to be slaves on slave ships other than Black people, not the white Jews, Black people. And after I read that, and I read through all the other curses of Israel, like you should not lend to them, they're going to lend to you. You're going to be on the bottom, they're going to be on the top. You're going to have sons and daughters that are going to go into captivity. There's nothing you're going to be able to do about it. And all these things, like the fruit of your labor and the fruit of the land that you're on, another nation is going to benefit from. So the very land that we stand on, and the very land that we toil and we work and slave on, and the fruit of our labor, another nation is going to benefit from, not us. And so when I looked at all these different verses, I said, this is talking about us. It's not talking about the Jewish people today. And being the son of a pastor and going to church for my whole life, I asked my dad and other people, ministers in the church, could we be the Israelites? And we've been tricked all this time. And they didn't want to hear none of that stuff. They was like, no, Jesus is white. We're Gentiles. What are you talking about? Now it's not the time. Maybe another day. Blah 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 blah. And so I just asked God to show me the truth. And when He showed me the truth, I started to do research, and different doors will open up like a Pandora box, like a secret door lead to another secret door. And so it led me to find out the truth about our identity. Because in the Christian church and in the public school system, in many black inner cities, nobody was teaching this to us. The only thing we were being taught in the schools is that we are descendants of slaves from Africa. And then also in church, you're being taught that you're a Gentile and that Gentiles can be saved. You know, just believe and have faith in Christ, your Savior, and don't worry about uh, who are you according to the Bible. Just remember that you're a Gentile. A Gentile, the term Gentile is just a word. Doesn't tell you your ethnicity or lineage or heritage or your ancestry. And so black people just accept these terms and just go about their daily lives without trying to connect to who they really are. So that was the quest that started it all. And of course, after all the information that I had put together and saved and printed out and jotted down notes and stuff, you know, I used all this research to make the book. And in the second book, and the third book, and the fourth book, and then the movie, and the second movie, and the third movie, and the fourth movie, you know. And it's just that now, because of Kyrie Irving, is getting a lot more attention than what it was getting in 2014 and 15 and coming up to right now.
I wanted to ask you specifically because I grew up um, in my teenage years in a Pentecostal apostolic religion, which is for those who never, experienced that. It's another level of Christianity. And continually we were taught that we were Gentiles over and over again. So I was led to believe we were kind of just, we weren't the chosen people of God. We were, the others, so to speak. And so this information being exposed to me, opened up my eyes to a different perspective of who we are and who I am, because it really goes against what, we've been taught in these Black churches. And you growing up with in the household of a pastor or a preacher, you know how much doctrine is important. How do you believe that the current state of the Black church is, and how do you what do you think that they would take from by watching Hebrews to Negroes now?
Well, I'm not telling them to change their doctrine because I still believe in the Old Testament and the New Testament and salvation through Christ. You know, we know that in the Apostolic Pentecostal Church that people are being baptized, people are being filled with the Holy Spirit, speaking in tongues, and all that stuff that happens in the Black church. But the only thing that I'm incorporating into, I guess, this religious community, if they accept it, is our truth in terms of our identity. So, you know, the Bible says that God is a spirit. You cannot worship him except in spirit and in truth. And so we may have the spirit and the gifts of the spirit, but there's a lot of truth that has been hidden from us and stolen from us and not given to us. And so this is just a addition of truth that the Black church should be able to teach and not be ashamed of it. Because when we go to Sunday school or Bible class, it should be also important to identify and teach that Black boy, Black woman, Black child, whatever, that you are a descendant of the Israelites, King David, King Solomon. These are your ancestors. And so therefore we have to insert ourselves into the book now that we read the Bible, that this is a book about our ancestors. And therefore any types of prophecy that comes in the future is going to be surrounding our people, not just the people that we see in the news in Israel today. So that's a big thing to swallow, to understand that you are the chosen people, you're the children of Israel, and now you need to start inserting yourself into the book as the Israelites, so that you can understand the past, the present, and the future.
Hebrews civilized Egyptians. Now, I have a huge rebuttal to that, because even when you say Europe was filled with Hebrews, we have to understand the differentiation in Hebrews. You got three different types of Hebrews. You have the original Hebrew, which actually is a white Jew. It's called Orthodox Hebrew. Then you have an unorthodox Hebrew, which are the Hebrews who allege that the Hebrew language can be spoken. And this was created in 1881 by Eliezer ben Yehuda to which they created a language for them to utilize in the nation that they call today Israel, which was not created until I believe 1948. So the Hebrew language has only been spoken today for 100-something years. And so those are the first two branches of being a Hebrew. And then you have Black Hebrew Israelites who were created by an African. I believe he was from Nigeria. And so when Hebrews say we're not African, the entire Black Hebrew movement in America was started by an African who was copying off of white people. And so that has to be said. So now when you say the Hebrews civilized the Egyptians, that would be impossible for two reasons. For one, the Hebrew language comes from Germanic and Yiddish. It's from German and Yiddish combined. If you pull up the Yiddish alphabet and you pull up Hebrew and you pull up the German alphabet, they all look exactly the same. Germans and Yiddish people came centuries after Black African Egyptians. So there's no way German and Yiddish people could have civilized the Egyptians and gave them a language that not only to this day they can't decipher, but that they didn't have at the time themselves. The Hebrew language did not exist until 1881 when it was created by Eliezer ben Yehuda. There is no ancient vernacular Hebrew language. So the Hebrews could not have civilized or created anything in Egypt. And when we look for tangible proof of this, the Hebrews don't have no sarcophagus for their dead. They don't have no burial grounds for their dead. The Hebrews don't have no architecture. The Hebrews don't have no temples dedicated to women, because the Egyptians taught that the successor of the throne came through the woman. Hebrews teach that your bloodline go through your father. So it would be impossible for the Hebrews to have civilized the Egyptians when they gave the Egyptians, when if that's the case, why would they have gave the Egyptians a different teaching from what they teach? And then on top of that, the Hebrews never built one pyramid. So there's no way these Hebrews civilized all these African Egyptians, and then we can't go to Israel today and find nothing but sand and nothing. And so continuing down further, what you said the pharaohs were Arabs. There has never been an Arabian pharaoh in the history of actual history. These mummies have been genetically tested and they come back as African. The only pharaoh that we start to defer from being black, according to Egyptology, is when the Greeks/Romans started to invade Egypt. All of the pharaohs were black. Now I'm going to prove to you that all of the pharaohs were black. Now I'm going to go to the point that the Hebrews were never enslaved by the Egyptians. And in doing this, I'm also going to prove that the Hebrews were black. When you're talking about the dynasties of Egypt, the dynasties of Egypt were fabricated by the Egyptologist Society in order to fit the 6,000 year time frame of religion. So the Bible starts 6,000 years ago. Okay. The first dynasty of Egypt, founded in 3200 BC by Menes, allegedly, that's 6,000 years ago. So now here's the problem. 250 geologists have confirmed water and sand damage on these temples and pyramids. Now, the specific temple I'm going to go to is the Temple of Ramesses. And the reason I'm going here is because of this. In the Bible, Exodus chapter 1, verse 11, it states that the Hebrews were enslaved by Pharaoh Ramesses and were forced to build these temples and cities. And so here's the thing. The Temple of Ramesses is a 30,000 to 100,000 year old civilization. That takes it over 15,000 years before the Hebrew, aka biblical date of creation is said to have been had. And so here's the thing. How could the Hebrews have been enslaved by the Egyptians and forced to build a city that was already there before Pharaoh Ramesses himself was even there? And so this is why this is an important discussion, because Egyptology is a lie and everything that's feeding off Egyptology is a lie. So when you say that the pharaohs was Arabs, it's impossible for it had to been any other pharaoh that other than black, because there was only black people here 6,000 years ago and beyond. So if all of these temples were erected 30,000 years ago and beyond, there's nobody else who could have erected these temples but black people. And then I'm going to end on this. And I'm going to put the ball in your court to answer this question. Not only that, how could the Hebrews have been enslaved by the Egyptians if the temples that they saying they was forced to build was already there? I'm going to hit stop on the timer and I'm going to let you answer that question. I'm going to give it to you one more time before You answer so we have clarity. I'll stop the timer. I'm giving you the question one more time. How could the Hebrews have been forced? I mean, how could the Hebrews been enslaved by the Egyptians and been forced to build temples and monuments that were already there? That's the question.
Have you ever heard of a Phoenician princess called Jezebel? Jezebel had became a princess in the Israel kingdom by marriage. Now she was a worshiper of Baal and worshipped many deities.
And what year was this?
This was about like 600 BC.
So
this is around the time.
But the temples was already there. So the question is,
she helped start the Sumerian Empire, bro.
Right,
so
but I'm talking about
the temples was already there. The temples already there from Ramses II, yes, because the Phoenicians from that time, when Ramses II got in there, after let me see, what was the name of it? It was a Tutankhamun. When he became king, he became king because he was a son-in-law of a pharaoh. That pharaoh, he didn't have no heir to the throne at that time. The whole breakdown of the Egyptian dynasty became flawed due to foreign influences. Now, the way the Hebrews were enslaved by the Egyptians were because, like I said, the Phoenicians were Hebrew. The sea people were Hebrew.
What year was this?
What year was this? Oh, this was.
Hold on.
This was all through the 18th dynasty. This was through the 18th and the 19th and through the 19th dynasty. In the year 1200, this is when the Egyptians went to war with the Phoenicians. Have you ever heard about that battle when the Egyptians went to war with the Phoenicians and King Ramses II conquered and then Ramses III conquered all of Phoenicia?
Bro, the question. Wait. We want to stay on topic. The topic is, and the question is, how were the Hebrews enslaved by the Egyptians?
The Hebrews were
structures that were already there. Everything that you're saying, whether we want to say it actually happened or not, is outside the time continuum of these buildings and constructs. And so my thing is, once again, in the Bible, because
it was built because this only the time when they raided the Phoenicians. Yes, the Phoenicians had already helped Egypt build their civilization up. They helped them build all of that shit. They didn't invade them until the 18th dynasty. So from the first dynasty all the way to the 18th dynasty, the Phoenicians were helping Egypt build their whole civilization up.
Okay, so what year was Egypt founded?
What year was Egypt founded?
Yes, if the Phoenicians helped Egyptians build Egypt, what year did they found Egypt to help them build that?
In what year? In the first dynasty.
Okay, now you're aware that the first dynasty is 3200 BC, right?
3200 BC.
Yes, that is when the first. Okay, so this is what I'm telling you. That's a lie because Egypt. Whoa, 3200 BC from today is roughly 6,000 years ago. So here's the problem. Egypt is a 100,000-year-old civilization. So this is what I'm trying to get you to understand. How did the Phoenicians help the Egyptians foundate a dynasty that was here before?
Who was the first pharaoh? Who was the first pharaoh of Egypt? What was his name?
They say Menes.
And he went by Nemar. That's who I said at the beginning of this, right? His name was Nemar. His name. Wait, no, listen. You're actually. I'm about to answer your question with what you said. Listen, now, there's factual proof that he established a trade agreement with the Phoenicians when he first unified Lower Egypt and Upper Egypt. When they unified it into one, there was a trade agreement established.
What year did he unify Egypt?
In the first dynasty. You can look it up. You can Google it.
It was already here. There was no first dynasty. This is what I'm trying to get you to understand.
But you just said Menes was the first pharaoh.
No, that's what Egyptologists say. I'm saying that.
Who was the first pharaoh? Who was the first dynasty? Who started the first dynasty then?
Bro, listen to what I'm telling you, bro. The Egypt was not founded in 3200 BC. There is no first dynasty. That's what Egyptologists tell people in order to shrink the history of Egypt to fit the Bible. So what I'm saying to you is, how could any of this shit have taken place? How could anybody have unified Upper and Lower Egypt that was a Phoenician, excuse me, how could the Hebrews have been enslaved by Pharaoh Ramesses if all of this shit was here before all of them? Even Menes. They say that Pharaoh Menes founded Egypt. What I'm saying is, how could Pharaoh Menes have founded Egypt if Egypt was here 100,000 years before him?
He didn't find Egypt. He unified the lower parts
No,
and upper parts.
they say Egypt was founded in 3200 BC by Pharaoh Menes, bro. That is what is widely taught.
Yes, no, that's what it says. He unified it. He unified it. It was pharaohs in
No,
lower Egypt, and it was pharaohs in upper Egypt.
They say he built. They say he started.
It was. Then what are you going off of? Then if you're not believing Egyptology, what are you basing your information off of then? Because when you get down to the 18th dynasty, you get down to the 19th dynasty. Like I said, they were mixed breeded pharaohs. The whole bloodline was corrupted during the 18th and 19th dynasty. So what are you basing off of? You just pick a part of what dynasty you want to say that you're a part of. What African society are you a part of? Period. You ever know what ethnicity of African you associate with?
Can I answer that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so when you say what do I associate with, being a Hebrew is not a genetic orientation. Are you aware that there's white Hebrews and Spanish Hebrews, correct? Yeah.
Yes, they are. But what I'm telling you is this: the separation between the Hebrew.
Ain't no but. You know that there are white and Spanish Hebrews. So calling yourself a Hebrew ain't no difference than calling yourself a blood or a crip. It's not a genetic.
Yes, it is. It's a blood. It's a blood. It's different blood. It's Hamitic blood and it's Hebrew blood.
How can it be if white people, according to the Bible, okay, is descendants of Esau and they wicked? How can it be a white descendant of Moses? How can it be a white Hebrew? How can it be a Spanish? How can it be a Spanish Hebrew? Wasn't no Spanish people back then, but it's Spanish people on the corner dressed up like Hebrews reading from the book. And so this is the
Spanish people are black people. This comes from the tribe of Issachar.
No,
yeah. Oh, Mexicans are black people. What are you talking about, bro? Are you serious? That's how you know your information is limited, and you going off of black knowledge, and you going off of some. Wow.
Listen,
wow. Mexicans are not. They're not described from a tribe of Issachar. So the Mayans and the Aztecs are Hebrews.
Are you telling me right now? That Hebrews from Israel, some magical way, came way over to North America and Central America and built these goddamn pyramids and then changed their name to Mayans and Olmec? Why wouldn't they just keep calling themselves Hebrews?
They were Hebrews. They were Issachars before they was even Mayans. When Edomites came over there into Mexico, yes, they changed it down. They made when they first washed it down, they made it was called a Melitique. And then when Spain came over there again, and they washed them out again, they made a Mexican. A Mexican is nothing but pretty much a European mixed with an Aboriginal.
Okay, and so let me ask you a question.
So there's not Afro Latinos that have our same blood that trace back to the E1B1A bloodline.
Is a Latino or a Latin person or a Spanish person a race, or is it a language? Can you be Spanish? No.
The old Latin and the older Latin and Ashaic version of it was changed up because they couldn't pronounce the words that we was pronouncing. Just like you said that Hebrew was a made up white man's language. No, they took our shit and wrote it in a way that they can pronounce it in a way that they can give it to their people. They stole our.
Go ahead. Keep talking. I'm gonna just take some notes. Go ahead.
Yeah, just take notes, bro. Because at the end of the day, you saying that a Mexican wasn't black. You think that what happens when a black person mates with a white person right now? Yes, they make a hybrid race. Like you said, Creole. That ain't nothing but French mixed with a Negro. Just the same concept with the Hispanic and the Afro-Asian. It's the same concept, bro. The Hebrew spread it out into Asia. And that's where the Sambo come in. Buddha was black until they whitewashed him down. The original name of Buddha was Sambo, and he was a Hebrew that escaped persecution. So to say that Mexicans, that Afro-Asians, they don't have black. I mean, come on, bro. You lost. You just stuck on this African mindset, and you believe you pick one dynasty to go off of, and you just said that that's Egyptology. So what do you go off of? You just hop up in the middle and say, okay, I picked this dynasty. This is what I'm about to go off of. No, it doesn't work like that.
I didn't pick a dynasty to go off of, and you totally missed what I said. and you still did not answer the question. But you could do what you want to do until your time runs out. Once again, I'm gonna read. It's 7 minutes left on the clock, if you want it or not. Once again, I'm gonna reiterate my question. My question was, how could the Hebrews have been enslaved by the Egyptians and been forced to build the Temple of Ramesses if the Temple of Ramesses was here a minimum of 30,000 years ago before that time period? That is the question.
And I just explained it. Like you said, Menes in Egyptology, like I said, he established this trade agreement with the Phoenicians between the Sinai Mountains. They built their warships they traded the best wood with them, and they traded purple dye with them. They traded red dye with them, and pretty much made their garments for their high-ranking priests. Before Ramses even came into play, they were already trading with these Phoenicians. When Ramses got into there, they invaded the Phoenicians and enslaved them. That's how the Egyptians enslaved them. The whole 19th dynasty enslaved Hebrews, bro. What are you talking about? Most of them fled to Jordan, they fled to Sudan, and they fled to Somalia. You actually, I just answered the question. I don't know how much more you want me to explain to it. Who are the Hebrews? The Hebrews are the Phoenicians, and that's factual proof. Anybody talking in the comments after this, go look up the Phoenicians and go look up the Sea people, which is modern day northern Israel, Lebanon, and Syria. Okay. Those were the Hebrews. When Ramses went in there, he washed up all their information. That's why Ramses the Great civilization was the best, because he stole Phoenician information. He stole Phoenician astrology.
All right, I'm with it. Listen, when you done, just let me know. If not, you can rock. You still got time on the clock.
No, I mean you can go. We can go do it, then go back and forth. But you asked me a question of how did the Egyptians enslave the Hebrews? At the rise of Egypt, when it was Lower Egypt and it was Upper Egypt.
Okay.
The Phoenicians helped build up the civilization. And then in the 18th dynasty, they invaded that same country that was helping them out and building up their civilization, which were the Hebrews. They took them through the Sinai Mountains back into Egypt and enslaved them. There wasn't no servants. There wasn't none of that. They were prisoners of war and slaves. Yes, all that shit was built because they helped them build it. Because they did trade agreements. After that, they wasn't getting no compensation in return for their deeds and their knowledge and their wisdom. They were enslaved. You going around what I'm trying to tell you. You just using your followers and your comments in order to avoid my answer. No, listen. Your question is pure this. I don't know. What are you doing? What kind of psycho shit you doing? But you're trying to say, the whole thing was, did the Egyptians enslave the Hebrews? I said that the Phoenicians were Hebrew. They had a trade agreement with Lower Egypt and Upper Egypt before Egypt wasn't even considered a whole country. After that trade agreement was abolished in the 18th and 19th dynasty, they enslaved those same people that helped them build up their dynasty. Those were the Hebrews, were the Phoenicians. On the other side of the Sinai Mountains, that small peninsula that separates Egypt from what's considered today as modern Middle East. Yes, they enslaved those people to the right. You say it's not a difference in blood. It's the same. No, Africans are of Hamitic and Canaanite blood. Hebrew blood, where we're positioned at a higher elevation. This is all coordinates, bruh. 33 degrees parallel. We on 33 degrees north. I stay in Compton.
Can I respond?
I'm in Compton.
Can I respond? Okay, let me click my timer on. My timer is on. Okay, now let me help navigate you here. Okay, now, in order for the Hebrews to have been enslaved by the Egyptians, it would have to be during the rule of Pharaoh Ramesses. This is not according to me. This is according to y'all. This is according to y'all book. Now I'm going to read the verse. Exodus chapter 1, verse 11. King James Bible states, therefore, they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramesses. And so I'm not making this shit up. This is what y'all teach. And so here's the question once again. How could the Hebrews have been enslaved by Pharaoh Ramesses and been forced to build Pharaoh Ramesses when the city of Ramesses is a 30,000-year-old temple. This story is alleged to have taken place 4,000 to 6,000 years ago, maximum. This temple is a 3,000-year-old city, and if you want to really be specific, the story is only 3,000 years old. So the story does not match the age of the actual buildings. Let me give you an example. If you come in my house and you say, young Pharaoh put up this damn background yesterday, but then scientifically they test this background and they see that this shit been up here for 3 years, that means what I told you was a lie. So that is why I'm saying the Hebrews were never enslaved by the Egyptians, because according to the Hebrews' own teachings, the cities that they were forced to build were there before they were even there, and were there before the Pharaoh who allegedly enslaved them was even there. And so that story is a lie. Now let me continue.
According to Egyptology, right?
According to facts.
No, what's facts? Egyptology, right? What is your facts? Egyptology? No, you said that according to RT. What is real then? You said like
okay, let me reiterate it one more time. If you go to Egypt and you chip off a piece of the Temple of Ramesses and you take it to a geologist, or you take
Egyptology,
or a geologist, science. Listen, and you take it to a geologist and you take a piece of this rock or this granite or this stone from the Temple of Ramesses, and you go to a science lab and you test it for water damage, sand damage, carbon dating, etc., they're going to tell you this is a 30,000-year-old object. And so the age of the object and the construct of the object does not match the time frame that the story say that the object was built. So the Hebrews could have never been enslaved by the Egyptians, and they could have never been forced to build those temples because the temples were already there. Now let me go down the list.
Because the Phoenicians helped them. Because the Phoenicians helped them.
Listen, the Phoenician alphabet. Because I'm finna answer your question.
When was the pyramids of Giza? When was the pyramids of Giza built? Listen, when was
listen, bro, I got the Phoenician alphabet right here. Let me answer it. My time has not run out yet. I got it right here in my notes. The Phoenician alphabet came out around 1200 BC. That's roughly 30,000 years ago. The first alphabet system, factually documented, is known as a hieroglyph or the hieroglyphics. The definition of the word hieroglyphics means undeciphered. Now, the reason that the hieroglyphics are undeciphered is because they're ideograms, aka a grammatical image that conveys an idea. So the definition of an ideogram is an image depicting an idea void of grammatical text, okay, or vernacular expression. So with that being said, the Phoenician alphabet is grammatical text of vernacular expression void of an idea. Let me give you an example. The letter A does not give you an idea when you see it, and it's a form of grammatical text. If you see the Kepra beetle in Egypt, it's not a grammatical text. You can't speak it, but it gives you an idea. So another form of an ideogram will be a gang sign. If you go to a certain neighborhood and you see a pitchfork, there's no letter in the alphabet for pitchfork, but if you associate it with that gang, you know what that means. And so the ideograms, aka hieroglyphics, are 100,000 years older than the Phoenician alphabet. So once again, the Phoenician alphabet or the Phoenicians could have never civilized the Egyptians because their writing system not only lacks mental and spiritual essence, it's 100,000 years after the Egyptians were already writing on papyrus with hieroglyphics. And so now we coming down to Mexicans are you said Mexicans are black. Mexicans are not black. A Mexican person is a Mongoloid, aka a Chinese person, a white person, aka a Spaniard, and a mulatto. A Mexican person is not black. Now, if you want me to pull it up, I will, but I said we're not doing no PowerPoints. I'm not on Google or none of that. I'm coming right off the dome, and I just got my notepad. But if you want me to, I'll pull it up. Genetically speaking, a Mexican is not a black person. A Mexican is a Mongoloid and Caucasoid humanoid. If you look at a Mexican man and you pull up a picture of a Chinese man, they're going to look the same. Mexican people are not black. This is facts. Their haplogroup does not match ours. So this is my issue with the Hebrew doctrine. Hebrews jump on people culture and then just say they Hebrews. Like, you can't just come to America, look at the Aztecs and the Mayans, and then say, oh, they Hebrews. Because even when we say Mexicans, right? Mexicans speak Spanish. They speak Spanish because Sir Francis Drake, who was a Caucasian man, considered a Spaniard. The language Spanish comes from Italy, and it was used in witchcraft. That is what the Spanish language was created for. So when Queen,
for old Latin.
Exactly.
And that's when Hebrews ran Europe. And Hebrews didn't run Europe at that time. Hebrews ran Spain at that time. What do you
has nothing to do with black people. And so that's what it said. When Sir Francis Drake circumnavigated the world and enslaved black people in South America and Central America, this is how black people became Mexicans. The same way black people became mulattoes, through rape and through slavery. So the same way that me and you speak English, because we were conquered by Englishmen, before the Englishmen conquered us, the Spaniards or the Spanishmen conquered. And so that is how some black people speak Spanish. So when we're talking about Afro-Latinos, or we're talking about Hispanic people, period, their entire culture was given to them through conquest, just like ours was. And so being Spanish or being Hispanic or being Mexican or being Dominican is not a genetic ethnicity. It's a linguistic subscription. You can't be Spanish. It's a language. You can't be none of that. Genetically, we are genetically, black people are descendants of the mitochondrial Eve gene. We don't have any Neanderthal. All non-black people are only 93% human beings, 7% Neanderthal. So just because Hebrews are trying to substantiate their premise does not give Hebrews an excuse to start taking other people's cultures under the wing and subscribing them to Hebrew. Israel is way over there on the other side of the country. How the hell is people in Central America Hebrews? How the hell is people in Mexico Hebrews? How the hell?
Because they fled persecution. Because they fled persecution, bruh. Like you pretty much,
you know
how you're thinking is how the white man, how you think of black people better than everybody, and that was the problem. That was our downfall. Yes it is, because it's proven fact that the Mayans the Incas and the Aztecs trace back to Hebrew blood. In the Bible, their tribe was called the Issachar. Their cultures even their cultures even resemble Egyptian practices. The Day of the Dead is an Egyptian practice.
Bro, I got 6 minutes.
Oh, my fault. Oh, go.
You're right. Let me pull this up. Let me pull this up. I have 5 minutes to do this. I'm pulling up a map of Africa to show you something from a realistic point of view. We got to be realistic. We got to be realistic here. We got to be realistic. Okay? Let's pull up a map of Africa, right? And then we're going to pull up the 7 continents. Okay? We're gonna be real. We're gonna be realistic here. We're not gonna do no biblical fantasies. Okay, let me share my screen. Let me share.
I didn't take one biblical fantasy at this one whole debate, bro. I went factual.
Okay, now this is the actual size of Africa. Because in case you don't know, Africa is drawn smaller on the map than it really is. Africa in reality is big enough to fit every other continent inside of it a minimum of one time. So China can fit inside Africa, Mexico, Western Europe, India, the United States, Japan. Okay. So now when you look at how Africa is drawn here on the map, you can see they made it extra small on purpose. Now let's take the true size of Africa into consideration and let's be real. Israel is over here. The Mayans, the Aztecs, the Incas, the Olmecs are over here. Now let's take Africa and then we got to quadruple the size to make it realistic. Now let's repeat what you said. If the Hebrews were fleeing persecution, here's 2 things that's wrong with that. You telling me the Hebrews made it way across this big ass continent to the West Coast, then sailed across the Atlantic Ocean, and then did that in such a big population that they were able to populate 2 empty continents. Because in order for the Hebrews in order for the Aztecs and the Mayans and the Olmecs and the Incas to be Hebrews who fled persecution, that means they had to not already have been over here. So what you're saying basically is these shits was empty. Nobody was over here. Africa, as big as it is, the Hebrews were able to flee persecution, cross this big ass continent, sail across this big ass ocean, and then still have enough people living after all of that journey to populate all of this goddamn land over here. That's not a realistic story. That's not factual. That didn't happen. And so
I thought we was doing PowerPoint.
listen, this is not
I thought we was doing
PowerPoint. I
videos.
put up a map.
I would have did mine too.
You can do yours. I don't care what you do. But hold on, let me see how much time I got left. I got 3 minutes left. And so the point I'm trying to make is, just because somebody told us a story, don't make it true. Nobody fled from persecution and came way over here in America and populated America. It was people already over here. The Mayans and the Aztecs and the Olmecs don't know who Moses is. They don't know who Jesus is. They don't know who Virgin Mary is and Joseph is. And that's because they don't have shit to do with that fairy tale. And so my thing is, people tell us shit and they give us a sense of identity. It make us feel proud to feel like we something important. But at the end of the day, we all got to grow up. And we got to grow up to the point where we realize none of that shit never happened. It never happened. It never happened. There is no such thing as a black Hebrew. Moses never freed 600,000 people out of Egypt in bondage. They didn't find one dead body, one bone. There's no anthropological evidence. The temples is already there. None of that shit never happened. And it comes a time where we all got to grow up. And we all got to say, you know what? Even though this story gives me a sense of pride, it gives me a sense of strength, that don't make it real. It does not make it real. So just because the Bible say it, just because teachers in school say it, don't make it real. And so what I'm bringing forth is, let me see how much time I got left. All right, I got 2 minutes. We're 1:59 now. What I'm saying is, we got to come with the facts. We got to come with the facts. My thing is, I'm coming with facts that can be researched scientifically, geographical measurements that need to be taken into consideration, population numbers that need to be punched in, genetic variable factors that need to be punched in, because there are white Hebrews and there are Spanish Hebrews, as you confirmed. And so with that being said, I got 1:20 left. With that being said, that right there throws a monkey wrench in the game. Because if Hebrews are the original black people, how did people who allegedly knocked the Hebrews off they throne become Hebrews? That's just like how the Nation of Islam say the white man is the devil, but they got white people in the Nation of Islam. It don't make no sense to me. How did Spaniards and white people, okay, and Chinese people conquer Hebrews, but yet today they're on the corner dressed up as Hebrews? That doesn't make sense. And so even when a Hebrew say a Hebrew is not an African, the founder of the Hebrew movement in America is from Nigeria. He's an African. So even when y'all say y'all not African, the founder is from Nigeria. He's an African. He even identified as an African. And so I just want people to see the void. Let me see how much time I got. I got 20 seconds left. I want people to see not only the voids and the holes in the story, but the high levels of contradiction. And so I'm going to end on this. Exodus 1, chapter 11 says that the Hebrews were enslaved and forced to build the city of Ramesses. The city of Ramesses was here a minimum of 30,000 years before the alleged date that story takes place, which means the Hebrews could have never. I'm done. That's my time.
Now, I don't know, man. Like your story is like really, really conflicted. Like if that's what you believe, that's what you believe. Like, I mean, I don't know what to
add you at a time. I'm not going to let everybody up at once because I don't want my co-host to be bombarded. And raise your hand if you'd like to, come up as you come as a speaker. And so we only have 20 minutes left in this space. So I want to make it meaningful. And also, if you do want to come up on the stage, so I really would expect you all to already be following me and following my page, follow the co-host as well. But so if you're not following me, I'm not about to let you up on my stage, just respectfully. Hey, ODB, go ahead, sir.
Man, all right. I appreciate the space. Peace to the room. Peace to the family. Brother Ronald Dalton, man. The book, man. The mental or the mind nourishment, bro, that I just got from the book. You know what I mean? Reading it. I'm probably on chapter 14 right now on Audible. You know, going through and breaking down the open sea scrolls was where I'm about right now. Teaching about that. Was good. How did you come across the information for the open sea scroll?
Uh, that was like years or years ago. I mean, when the Most High woke me up, I was like a madman. Like studying like every day. Like at that moment, I didn't have kids. I had one kid, but I just was studying. Like I was studying for to take a board exam and to pass a class. You know, it was like a passion inside of me, and I just had a lot of information that I was taking in and felt that it was needed for Black people to see these things. So that's just one of the things that, out of all the things that I studied and researched, that I felt that we needed to know. People. I mean, it's a lot of information in there. Certain people may not understand it, depending on your grade level and your reading level. But if you are hungry for the truth and you like reading and you like to, fact check the sources, or just look at everything and just think of it like, okay, is it true or is it not true? What do I think? Should I fact check it? Should I do my own research and see if it's right or wrong? What you're going to find out that everything that I've researched is factual. I didn't just make this up out of thin air.
No, that's a fact. And then, have you read Babylon the Timbuktu?
Yeah, I read that. I read that after I wrote my books because I wanted to. Everybody kept talking about it, and I wanted to see what it was all about. And because that was one of the main books that the Israelites were promoting.
And the way that history is history. So the way that they match up and just like the history that you get in your book, the spread of people and how people move, man, I really loved it, man. So that was my question. I'm not gonna hold up the space because I know you said other people, but man, kudos to you. I appreciate the mental nourishment that I am getting from the book right now. You know what I mean? And then brothers like Kyrie Irving and people like that being able to draw, you know what I mean, encouragement and things like that. And hey, at the end of the day, they can paint it out to be whatever they want to paint it out to be, but history is history, and you can't change that. So it just is what it is. They can be mad about history all they want, but it's the truth.
Yeah, exactly. Who cares? Who cares they get mad?
Thank you, ODB. I'm gonna drop you back down. Hey, sis, I know you came up earlier, and then Naheem, you next.
Hi, thanks, Juicy. Definitely shifting the culture when it comes to Black news.
Thank you.
Appreciate you for having the interview, Ron. Thank you so much in the back channel trying to help me with my question. I have a very brief question. When President Obama at the time made the law change to that we couldn't use the word Negro on any federal documents, that after looking at the documentary and getting all the information, that to me just kind of connected the dots for me. But I wanted to know, how did you feel about that? And that was my question.
Oh, I didn't know he did. I mean, I didn't know he did. I know that my birth certificate doesn't say Negro; it says African American, and I think that my dad's birth certificate either says colored or Negro. I think. But I always believe that the word Negro is a cover up because they will always, mention Negro skulls or Negro this. Like what in the world is a Negro? They're like, you're in Egypt and you're classifying. You said you got an Egyptian skull, you got this skull, and you got this skull. You got a Negro skull. So we got an Egyptian skull, and now we got a Negro skull. So who are the Negroes in Egypt if the Egyptians had their own skull shape and pattern? And then when they say Negro land or Negrotia, the land of the Negroes, a 12-year-old Negro male, a Negress, they'll say that Negress, Negro male. You're like, what is a Negro? Like these terms that the white man came up with, to me, is a code word. It's a code word for who we really are. They don't want us to know that we are the Hebrews. And so instead of using that word Hebrew or Israelite, They're gonna say you're a Negro. We're gonna call this area Negro land. Your skulls are Negro. Like, this is ridiculous. You got pygmy skulls. You got these kind of skulls. You got Egyptian skulls. I say, what's a Negro skull? And so that to me is just a byword. It's a cover up for our true identity.
Thank you. Yes, in 2016, which is kind of correlates with some of the information you had coming out. In 2016, he passed a resolution or HR resolution that was signed in Congress. We can no longer use the word Negro, and I think it was an attempt to hide the information as well. I'm going to drop down. Thanks, Juicy.
Thank you so much. I have a question in the chat. Some people are not, I guess they don't want to come up, but Trouble from Birth asks, can you ask Ron what he thinks about the Apocrypha and if he incorporated any of that into his books or videos? Are you familiar with that?
Yeah. The Apocrypha, to me, is not. It may be a historical book to the Greeks, but I think that it's not a book that the ancient Israelites wrote, because many of the apocryphal books were not written in ancient Hebrew. They were written in Greek and other languages that the Hebrews did not know and speak of, or write. So the Book of Maccabees is not written in ancient Hebrew. It's not written in when you look at I break this down in the second movie. So in the second movie, I break down the flaws of the Book of Maccabees and that whole story that a lot of the Jews follow today, which they use to celebrate Hanukkah, which is a holiday that none of the people in Africa celebrate. That people in Africa will have 3 major feast days that they celebrate based along the harvest, but they don't celebrate Hanukkah. The Ethiopian Jews, the Lemba Jews, they don't follow Hanukkah, neither do they follow Purim.
Okay, Naheem, next question. Yeah.
Peace. What's going on, Sister Juicy? Shout out to the brother Ronald Dalton. You definitely shaking some things up. While I do not subscribe to the Hebrew Israelite ideology, I love the fact that it has stirred up all of the contention that we see among our people and the people that are called Jews today. So I just want to give you a shout out for that first and foremost. I have 2 questions. The first question is based on Israel and Canaan. Is your view, based on your study, that the Israelites are a branch of the ancient Canaanites?
No, the Canaanites were a separate nation of Ham, and the Israelites, forefather, their paternal father was a descendant of Shem. It just so happens that the Israelites, they took wives of the Canaanites and the Egyptians and the Cushites in the Old Testament. So they did marry women that were Canaanites and they had children with them. But they're not the same people, because Canaan's forefather was Ham, and Jacob's forefather was Isaac, and his forefather was Abraham, and his forefather was Terah. If you go far enough into the family tree, it goes back to Shem, the son of Noah.
Indeed. My research has taken me in a different direction, but I just wanted to get your views on that. My second question is, what is your views of Islam?
Of Islam?
Yes.
I don't. I think Islam is a religion that the Israelites should not follow, and I say that because the Romans and the Edomites have a lot to do with the religion today called Islam, and we have to understand that in Jordan and in North Arabia, there were deities that were worshipped prior to the advent of Islam, and the word Allah that ties the ancient Arabs and the Edomites to worshiping pagan gods, that they eventually said, you know what, you guys can continue to worship your pagan gods. We're just going to call the name of God Allah, which means the God. It's like Allah. Alat means the goddess. Al-Uzza means the mighty one. And Al-Manat means the fate. So Al means the. And Allah or Al-Ilah means the God. Means the God. Just like Allah means the goddess. So when you're saying Allah, you're basically saying we worship the God. Well, which God we worship? And so this is the thing now, that Islam is supposed to be a monotheistic religion, when if you read, I believe it's the second or the third book that I wrote, I break down the beginnings of Islam and how it's tied into the Roman pagan pantheon and the Edomite pagan pantheon. Remember Edom was like the Herodians. So the Herodians, like Herod the Great, and these guys that were like the mayors, and then Pontius Pilate was the governor. Pontius Pilate was a Roman governor at the time that gave up Barabbas, and they crucified Jesus. Well, you had the Herodians that were also in power, but they were like the mayors of Judea, Galilee, and Samaria, and they were also cool with the Romans, and they also intermarried with the Romans and the Greeks. So when Islam was formulated, they had something to do with that. And if you read book 2 and book 3, you'll understand the true inner workings of Islam.
Well, thank you, brother. I'm something like a historian in these matters. That's why I asked you those particular questions. I'm going to delve a little bit deeper into your works and, see where you've come up with some of these conclusions based on your own research and your methodology. And maybe I'm going to follow you here on Twitter. Maybe hopefully in the future, we could, have a little discussion on it.
Okay. All right.
Okay, guys, so we're going to be wrapping up soon. Thank you, Naheem. I wanted to take, let me see, who was next? I'm going to one more caller, and then we're going to wrap it up here. And we're going to find out what Ron Dalton is doing now and where we can go and support his projects. Go ahead, Julo. Is it Jolo? Your mic's on.
Hello?
Yeah, you can go ahead.
I just wanted to ask a quick question. I'm in my work truck, but I want to thank the brother first and just let him know that I want to know, since a lot of people believe that the Israelites were already here in North America and they subscribe and say that they're Judah, which tribes actually made it to America, before all the slave trades and stuff like this? That's it. I'm going to get back to work. Thank you.
Well, there's a lot of so the Indians were here, of course, when the Pilgrims got here, and they say that there were some people that left West Africa on boats and around the 13 or 1400s and never came back, and they say that they crossed past the Caribbean and then got to the Americas, I think South America, during the time where Islam was the major religion in West Africa, or West Africa, like Senegal, Gambia area. With the Native American Indians, if you read my books, you will find out a lot of what was hidden by the Christians and the Freemasons in regards to the North American Indians, and even like the pictures that they don't want you to see on Getty and Alamy images. There's pictures of black people in North Africa, in Israel, Jordan, in the Americas, in black and white, that are on Getty images and Alamy images that nobody would ever know exist, because these are these websites that that protect these images so that you can't see them when you Google it. You can Google Native American Indians black and white or Native American Indians vintage, and you're not going to get the images that they have stored in protection on Getty Images or Alamy, because unless you're a filmmaker and you know what you're looking for and you want to buy the rights to use the images, you're not going to even go on Getty Images to look for these things. So there are some things that they have covered up in regards to who were the Native American Indians that were not white people. They were people of color. They had a different DNA than the so-called Negro, and I'm not going to prescribe them to a certain specific tribe of Israel, but they do have some interesting connections that ties them back to the Middle East and the Levant and the tribes. You know, so you just gotta read all my books, and you're gonna kind of see these things.
Thank you. I'm gonna definitely check it out. Thank you.
Okay, Ron, if you could just leave a final word.
You're good, man.
Okay, I apologize, y'all. My signal was acting crazy. But long story short, so if the Adam and Eve story never factually, took place, then that means by default, everything else in the Bible, has not taken place. That's just, that's by default. So that's just for one. Now for two, you brought up Noah, right? And his 3 sons. Now, Noah landed according to biblical history, right? And I want to say this: biblical history or religious history or genealogy is not and has not been factually proven in the realm of actual science or history. So the reason that I say that is because it is difficult, not for me, but for the average person, it's difficult for them to prove origins of the stories, because the stories are completely from somebody's own, discernment and opinion. It's not from an actual point of reference. So I just want to make that clear as I as I get ready to expound upon this point. And if y'all give me 2 seconds, I'm transferring my USB back into my desktop because I want to put a image back up. But as I wait for that to load, when we're dealing with biblical genealogy, right?
Yeah.
Noah comes from the Caucasus Mountains. The Torah, the Bible, the Quran all agree that when after the flood, right, the boat landed in Mount Ararat, which is the Caucasus Mountains. So now the issue that I'm having with accepting Jews, black or white, claiming that they come from Israel is because in order to establish political legitimacy or monarchy, you have to establish that you are native to the land or that you are descendants of those who were native to the land.
Sure.
And if anybody is claiming that they're a descendant of Noah, they are claiming that they are descendants of the Caucasus Mountains. And so here's the issue that I'm having. Scientifically, according to the Australian Research Center for Ancient DNA, we can prove that white people, Caucasoid people, because even if you don't identify as white, the term Jew is not a genealogical description. You can't genealogically be a Jew. There's only 4 phenotypes: Dravidian, Caucasoid, Mongoloid, which is Asians and Koreans and all of them. And then there's Negroid, which is me and Africans. So Jews, whether you Ashkenazi, Khazarian, or whatever other terminology, y'all all fall genetically in the category of Caucasoid. And Caucasoids, according to not only history, but biblical history as well, descend from the Caucasus Mountains. So we have to ask ourselves, if we were here first as black people, and we know this to be fact, how with the Middle East being an extension of Africa, our Caucasoids claiming that they are native to a land that not only they were never there, they were there and inhabited it after us. And so here's my thing, right? As I continue to go down, because I want to make sure I touch on every point. You brought up Jacob, right? Now, we know that there were no J's back then. And people say that there were Y's. Now, I disagree with that as well. But staying on that notion, Jacob would be Jacob, which people would say is Yakub.
Yeah.
Now, Yakub in Hebrew literally means subplanter. And the reason that that's critical and the reason that that's important, as I get ready to share my screen right now. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna see if I can do it I'm gonna see, since I'm still tapped in on my laptop, I'm gonna share it like this. So I'm gonna bring my other one up, and then I'm gonna hit screen share, and I'm gonna just pause. So let me come back in. And as I was saying, the reason that knowing the definition is important of Yakub is because, once again, the Bible, I mean, monotheism is an entity used by Freemasons in order to communicate with one another. And as I bring this slide up right now, I'm going to show you what they're talking about. Okay, so when we talk about subplanting, right? To supplant, they're talking about genetic engineering. Now, why is this important? I'm not being racist. Let me pull up the damn article. This right here is from Molecular Biology and Evolution. And this clearly states that if you are not a descendant, it says if your heritage is non-African, you are part Neanderthal. Now, the number specifically is you are 93% human and 7% Neanderthal. Caucasians come from Dravidians. So when we talk about white people coming from albinos, here's the problem. They don't come from African albinos, or Caucasoids, I should say. Don't come from African albinos. This man over here on the left is an African albino. You can clearly still see he's an African. This man right here, which kind of looks like you but has blonde hair, comes from this albino Dravidian. So everybody just looking at this picture would think that this is a white man. This is not a white man. This is an albino Dravidian. So basically, everybody knows who Dr. Shiva is. This is Dr. Shiva if he was an albino. Now, I'm going to tell you why that's important. When we're dealing with science, we know from basic science 101, two separate species cannot sexually reproduce, or they're called hybrids. So we coming back to Jacob, aka Yaakov, which is a Hebrew word for subplant. And there's a story, and I'm going by, your history. There's a story where they say Yakub engineered a species of people on the island of Patmos. And Yakub is a term for a subplanter, and Patmos is not only an actual island, it's a Freemasonic lodge called the Island of Patmos. So white Freemasons, specifically Jews, do acknowledge that they have genetically engineered origins. And so this once again raises my issue with accepting Judaism, because not only do Caucasoid Jews have an inability to prove that they were somewhere first, they have an inability to prove where they were, period. Because if we deal with the terminology, right, before I go to, and let me check this off so I don't double talk. If we deal with the terminology, right, I'm gonna just deal with Ashkenazi and Khazarian. Okay. Khazar by definition means a wanderer. So there is no Khazarian Jew on the planet who can claim Israel when even by the etymological roots of their word, they call themselves wanderers. Now, Ashkenazi is Ashkenazi. Now, Ashka means beloved, and then you have Nazi. And Nazi is the combination of the word national and socialism. So the word Ashkenazi means to beloved national socialism. So you have one handful of Jews over here who don't have a land by decree of their own title. Then you got another handful of European converted Jews who are secretly Zionist Nazis by etymological terminology. So once again, the Judaic religion is a Masonic falsified history used to falsely establish political legitimacy where there is none. Now, I want to keep going down on your points, because we talked about the term, or you brought up the term Semitic, which comes from Shem and things like that. Now, the Torah, since we're dealing with the Torah, but monotheism as a whole is racist, and it promotes racism. Why do I say that? Because in the Torah, in the Bible, and in the Quran, they all specifically state that the descendants of Ham, which are black people according to biblical history, are to be the slaves and servants of Shem, which are Caucasoids, because Arabs are also considered Caucasoids. So the Bible, the Torah, and the Quran says that we're not only your slaves, you guys have a term for us that you call non-Jews, which is Goyim. So another issue that I'm having with the Jewish community is when we speak on the Jewish community and we call them out for terroristic behavior, even in the doctrine, if anything promoting slavery is terroristic, they reply with being anti-Semitic. But if I was a religious entity, I could flip that and say you're anti-Hamite, because the Bible says, and the Quran says, and the Torah says that we are the slaves of the descendants of Shem, and you guys actually call us Goyim. And when you read the Torah, which I have, it says that through the judicial system, hence Jew, that you can rob a Goyim. That basically, if a Jew is the plaintiff, and if the Jew is the plaintiff and the Goyim is the defendant, that the Jew shall always win. And I will pull the verse up if you need to see it. And so with that being said, not only is Judaism a non-established belief system, it's extremely racist, and it definitely promotes slavery. Now, as I continue to go down, right, Jacob wrestling with God, and you brought up the Bible, so I'll bring it up. In the Bible, Jesus says, "Nobody has ever seen or heard my Father." That's an actual quote. So if in the Bible Jesus says nobody has ever seen or heard my Father, how the hell could Jacob wrestle with God? And also, how did God speak to Moses if nobody ever heard or seen God? And then here's my question. Not only do we have to prove, okay, because if Israel is the original land of Caucasoid Jews, and it's an extension of Africa, why, if Jews are naturally from Israel, why is Israel the second largest? Why does Israel the second worst nation in the world involving sun cancer? Because if y'all were naturally supposed to be over there, it wouldn't have sun cancer at a level that high to where it's literally the second worst in the whole world. There is no nation in the world outside of the top, within the top 3 nations in the world suffering from sun cancer. Israel is number 2. So there's no way that you can naturally prove you're original to this land, even if we take the Bible out of it, if we take the Torah out of it, if we take the Quran out of it, you can't even live over there. And so continuing on, right, as I go down, right, I want to ask this question. When we're dealing with the Exodus, which means by definition a mass departure, right? This story says that 600,000 white people, according to Caucasoid Jews, because I know you wouldn't consider yourself white, so I'm going to say Caucasoid because I'm dealing with phenotypes. According to Caucasoids, 600,000 Caucasoids migrated out of Egypt and then wandered the desert for 40 years. Now, any Caucasoid person watching this, I'm not attacking you, but let's just be clear here. You couldn't live in the Sahara Desert for 40 days. Let's just be honest here. So you want us to believe that 600,000 Caucasoids left Egypt and then wandered the desert for 40 years and made it to Israel and established the nation. Meanwhile, you can't even go to the beach right now without getting sun cancer. So for one, that is scientifically an impossible story. Now, when we're dealing with Egypt, right, and the Jews, historical times and events in Egypt, right, and if possible, I would like you to write these down so you can answer these.
Yeah, I'm writing the whole time.
Yes, sir. They say that the Jews built the temple of Ramesses during their time in Egypt under enslavement of the Pharaoh Ramesses, right? Now, I'm going to tell you how that's false. Egypt is a 100,000-year-old civilization. The Egyptologists are complete liars, and they totally fabricated the story of Egypt. Now, the reason I'm bringing that up is to prove not only was the temple of Ramesses built before y'all allegedly got there, but here's the issue I'm having. And I want to give a shout out to a good friend of mine, General Seti, for this point. John Champollion, which was not a linguist, never, ever went to school for linguistics, but somehow was accredited with being the decipherer of 4,000 Egyptian hieroglyphic characters with a 26-letter alphabet. Somehow, John Champollion claims off of the cartouches in Egypt, he was able to decipher the word Ramesses. And this was in 1822. So the reason that this is critical and the reason that this is important is because in the 1611 Holy Bible, the King James Version, it states that the Temple of Ramesses was built by the Hebrews under slavery. I mean, under terms of enslavement. Now, the problem with that is, how did a word that came out 211 years after it was allegedly discovered end up in a book that was written 211 years allegedly before it was discovered? So that's the issue. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because these biblical stories have been recently modified and then backdated to give themselves an ancient presence where there is none. The oldest Torah, according to National Geographic, scientifically documented and carbon dated, is from the 1200s. It's 800 years old. And by you being an Orthodox Jew, I am assuming that you're well aware of the fact that Orthodox Jews don't believe that the Torah can be read. And the reason that that's important is because the reason that Orthodox Jews don't believe that the Torah can be read is because the Hebrew language was not fully established until 1881 by Yosef ben Yehuda. And the Old Testament, which was allegedly written by Moses, could not have been written by Moses because the Hebrew alphabet, which is nothing more than a combination of German and Yiddish, did not come out until after Moses' death. So how did Moses write a testament in a language that did not exist during his lifetime? Now, as I continue to go down these notes to respond to what you said, okay? Another question I would like for you to answer is this. Let's assume that Moses was a Caucasoid, okay? And I believe from my research, Moses is a fictional character that's plagiarized off of the Pharaoh Thutmose III. But let's just deal with biblical genealogy here and religious ideology. If black people was on the planet first, which we know this to be a fact, and Caucasoid entities have been on this planet for no more than 4,500 to 6,000 years, right? Why did God never speak to us? Why did God watch us live on this planet for millions of years? Watch us navigate this world for millions of years. They found Egyptians in the Grand Canyons. They found Egyptians in Japan. They found Egyptians all around the world, not just in Africa. Egypt was a global empire. Black people were the first people to circumnavigate and civilize this planet. And all of our history is being hidden. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because why did God wait until the white man or the Caucasoid man stepped foot allegedly into Africa to decide he wanted to speak to them as his chosen people? Because the reason I'm having an issue with this doctrine is not only does it promote pedophilia, because it does. The Torah says that you can molest. I'll pull a verse up if you need to see it. The Torah says that you can molest a little girl, and it doesn't matter as long as she's 3 years. I'm about to pull it up right now. So not only does the Torah promote pedophilia, it promotes slavery. But the real question is, what made God decide he want to talk to Caucasians or Caucasoids and ignore black people for millions of years? Straight up. And if we know that black people were here first, if we were to actually acknowledge the Adam and Eve story, the Adam and Eve would be black by default, which means all of the descendants of Adam and Eve would be black by default. And the reason that this is important is because the Bible is based off astrology, as I stated. The 12 tribes of Israel are nothing more than the 12 zodiac signs. For example, the tribe of Judah, which is the lion, is nothing more than the Leo constellation. This is why Jesus told his disciples, when they get to a certain location, they'll see a man bearing a pitcher of water, because the pitcher of water is the age of Aquarius that we're going into as we're leaving the age of Pisces. So all of these monotheistic religions are actually based off astrology, and they're nothing more than occult platforms that Freemasons use to communicate with each other. And the reason I brought that up is because you brought up the definition of Abraham, who is the father, who Moses is a descendant of. Abraham, by definition, means Abram. That's how you the original spelling of Abraham is Abram, A-B-R-A-M. A-B, Ab means before, and then R-A-M is Ram, which means the zodiac sequence before the constellation of Aries, because Moses represents the age of Aries. This is why when you look at any statue of Moses from antiquity, he has horns like a ram, because the Bible is just based off astrology, and the Torah is based off astrology. These are not actual events that actually took place. Now, as we continue to as I continue to go upon some points that you made, or speak upon some points that you made, also I wanted to talk about the commandments in Mount Sinai, right? Because Sinai by definition just means heat and high point of the sun. And we have to ask ourselves, in dealing with reality, Moses, especially if he was white or Caucasoid, if Moses was a Caucasoid, it's no way in hell he went up at the highest point of that mountain underneath the sun and came down without sunburn, let alone was he strong enough to carry some giant stone tablets. That's not physically possible. It's not logically possible. Just like the story of Noah's Ark. If we by definition deal with the story of Noah's Ark, and we deal with it from a realistic point of view, all of them animals would have started to fight and kill each other out of hunger. Also, they said there were penguins on Noah's Ark. So we have to ask ourselves, how the hell did animals that are not native to Africa get on an ark, survive in an environment that it is impossible for them to survive in, and then end up on other continents that the ark never even went to?